This program contains graphic violence and sexual situations. Viewer discretion is advised.
April 21st, 2014. A couple is inspired to murder by one of Hollywood's most famous cult classics, the Boondock Saints.
By watching the film, it really inspired them to take the steps they felt they needed to take to commit murder.
This was about as violent a crime as it gets. And these were two men basically slaughtered in their own home.
In the Boondock Saints, vigilante justice is a glorified way of protecting the streets against evil.
The Boondock Saints shows that no matter what horrible thing you do, as long as you're doing it for the greater good, that's okay.
But in real life, when jealousy turns to cold-blooded murder, no one is safe.
This is a story about a love triangle that went wrong. When they were watching the movie, James Roach thought that one of the characters was Ronald Evans, and that's why he wanted him dead.
A Hollywood crime movie plays out on the streets of a small town, and no one will believe what this couple will do for love.
Baffles me and scares you at the same time because you know what happened, the outcome was, and you can't picture what they were thinking as it was happening.
This movie is fiction, it is fantasy, and yet it somehow crossed the lines with reality.
Holly Crawford and her boyfriend, James Roach, believe murder is the answer to all their problems.
They're angry. They've been angry for a long time. They have no means to go anywhere. They are unemployed drug addicts.
So when they sit down to watch the cult classic shoot-'em-up film, The Boondock Saints, it's like pouring gas on a fire.
Boondock Saints is the story of two brothers who are very religious and decide to take matters into their own hands in order to stop evildoers. I think that we tend to glamorize vigilantism with the Batmans and other things where people don't really have to face the consequences of their actions.
When they want Boondock Saints, seeing that violence seems to trigger something inside them both.
Holly's mom testified against Holly, against her own daughter, saying the night of the murder when they were watching Boondock Saints, she heard James say, "I want to kill that son of a bee." And Holly said, "I'll go with you."
In the film, the McManus brothers kill for what they believe is a good cause. And in real life, James is about to do the same.
He identified with what the vigilantes were doing, and also that he felt very righteous in what he felt he had to do.
Years before the Boondock Saints changed the course of her life, Pennsylvania resident Holly Crawford has faced more bumps in the road than she can count. Local reporter Matt Petrillo gets to know Holly's story well.
Growing up, Holly was kind of by herself. A lot of the time, she was very quiet. She was known to walk on a long dirt road from her home to her bus stop. Oftentimes, her parents weren't there.
Holly led a rather isolated life. And neighbors describe her as a lonely child, and a child that they felt sorry for.
Her only friend seems to be her own father.
She used to shadow her father as he did construction work, as he did chores around the house.
He had a closeness with her, and she really loved him.
But as she grows older, Holly makes up for her lonesome childhood.
Holly's wild side came out, I think, when she was a teenager. She She had some friends, finally, but they weren't the kind of friends that any parent would want for their kid.
She hung out with a crowd who liked to party, they liked drugs and alcohol, and that's something that followed Holly for the rest of her life.
By the time she's 17, Holly becomes estranged from her parents and moves out of their house.
Her parents let her move out. So one can only speculate that maybe there was additional conflicts in the home, and both parties agreed that she should move out. There probably was a lack of goals and a lack of direction for Holly. And unfortunately, by age 18, she found herself pregnant.
Holly moves back home and gives birth to her first daughter, Tristan. But before long, her relationship with Tristan's dad falls apart.
Their relationship was pretty much over before it even started.
The sad part of this is you have a woman ill-prepared to raise a child. So who raises the child, really, but her parents?
Becoming a new mother doesn't seem to slow Holly down. She continues to party and soon finds herself pregnant for a second time.
Holly would be considered an extremely self-focused individual. Unfortunately, more driven and invested in drugs and alcohol and men than she would with taking responsibility to raising her child.
But just a few years after the birth of her second daughter, Alexa, Holly's world comes crashing down.
In the early 2000s, something did happen to Holly. Her father passed on, and that did devastate her. At that point, she claimed she couldn't deal with the grief following her father's death, and she turned to heroin as a form of escape.
According to her mom, Holly depended on alcohol, and oftentimes she would mix drugs in it. Her mother described Holly as someone who was drunk 24/7.
Drugs provided her with an escape, and she was addicted.
Holly's dealer, Larry Tooley, becomes a mainstay in her life.
Larry Tooley was a very dangerous man, and he had already served time in prison. But that didn't matter to Holly because Holly only cared about procuring the drugs.
Holly will do anything for Larry as long as he feeds her addiction. Larry is about to put Holly's loyalty to the test. He decides to rob a house for money. Larry knows the target because his girlfriend Tina used to babysit there.
She knew this family, and she felt they were the perfect target. She knew the layout of their house, and she also knew their schedules. The schedules were important because she knew when, or so she thought, no one would be in the house.
But things don't go according to plan. Someone is inside the home.
The 16-year-old surprised him as he expected no one would be in the house. And he shot that 16-year-old boy 3 times, murdering that individual.
With nowhere to go, Larry calls Holly knowing she will do anything for a fix.
Larry Tooley called Holly for a ride. Holly agreed to drive them to Newark because she thought they would be going there to score some heroin, which she herself craved.
But once inside the car, Holly quickly realizes this isn't an ordinary trip.
Holly claims she knew nothing about a murder, and she thought she was just going to drive them to Newark to score a drug deal.
It doesn't take long for police to apprehend Larry and Tina for the murder. They are eventually prosecuted for the crime, but Holly avoids any time in jail.
She doesn't want to go to jail, so she testifies against him.
But her close encounter with the law only fuels her life in the fast lane.
Holly has a significantly long rap sheet. You name it, she's done it.
Holly will do anything to get her hands on some fast cash.
Holly gets involved in a series of strong-armed robberies where they fall upon a woman and just forcibly steal her handbag right from her, like out of the blue.
Holly is eventually arrested, only this time, her crimes land her in prison.
While Holly's in prison, she goes into a drug rehab program and she gets clean.
When Holly is released, she vows to change her life for the better.
She states she realizes that she put her addiction above her family and she didn't like who she had become.
But no matter how serious Holly is about making a fresh start, she can't seem to stop making bad decisions.
To make some money, Holly begins selling Gothic cats online. Holly would take in these stray cats and pierce their ears, pierce their tails, and she eventually launched a website called gothickittens.net. It was very weird. Prosecutors say that she used the money to fund her drug habit, instead of caring for her daughters and trying to get a real job.
But it's not long before the entire operation is under investigation.
Holly's caught by selling these Gothic kittens after someone wants to see them in person and sees they have pierced tails and pierced ears, so they report her. Detectives later followed up and discovered she has a whole bunch of these cats.
The news of Holly's sick transactions sends shockwaves across the country.
A lot of people figured that this was hurting the cats. She was literally piercing their ears. It was just kind of a disgusting way to make money.
Holly is eventually arrested for selling the cats. She is found guilty of animal cruelty.
She was called a monster by her community.
Holly was sentenced to 6 months of house arrest, and after that, she was on probation for another 21 months.
It seems Holly has once again escaped with a slap on the wrist, but she won't be this lucky for long.
I think that's where you really realize that Holly wasn't gonna have like a redemption that would lead her to a happily ever after. She was going in the completely opposite direction.
This story doesn't have a happy ending. They destroyed lives, including their own.
Holly Crawford is a woman who can't seem to stay out of trouble. She's like the McManus brothers in the cult classic film, The Boondock Saints.
We meet the brothers in a church, and I think that sets the tone for the film, because aside from all of the violence that we see, there's almost an equal amount of religious reference. After the brothers leave the church, they go to their favorite bar to celebrate St. Patrick's Day with their friends. A few Russian mobsters show up at the bar and interrupt everyone's good time. There's one thing that you don't do, it is mess with the McManus brothers' favorite bar.
Feeling like a failure, Holly turns back to the one thing that provides her with the most pleasure.
She returns to drugs and alcohol abuse. Drugs and alcohol, at least for Holly, is something that she'd known for almost the majority of her life, 16 years on.
With no income, Holly needs a way to make money. But instead of securing a real job, she finds another method of getting paid. His name is Ronald Barney Evans.
Barney had won over $100,000 in a lottery. Plus, he had his Social Security checks monthly coming in.
Emery Coker, a friend of Barney's family, remembers him fondly.
Barney was just a good guy. He used to come over to my house. We'd have coffee, stuff like that. Very friendly, you know.
And Emery remembers hearing all about Barney's relationship with Holly.
He would take her out to eat, buy her clothing, jewelry, whatever she wanted, basically.
Barney Evans was like Holly Crawford's sugar daddy. She would have sex with him. He would give her money, drugs, and other gifts.
He actually had the financial resources to provide Holly with money every time they saw each other. So it really was a perfect setup for both of them.
Although Barney is 34 years older than Holly, she doesn't seem to care.
Barney got Holly, who he desired, and Holly got money after every sexual interaction so she could then procure drugs.
She used him just as much as he used her. It was kind of a symbiotic relationship.
Through Barney, Holly can get anything she wants.
She found her meal ticket, and she was going to milk that meal ticket for as long as she could.
Soon, Barney and Holly's extended family start to blend. Barney's son, Jeff, knows about the scandalous relationship.
Barney's divorced. He's living with his son, Jeff.
He didn't want his dad to be lonely, you know. They like watched each other, like Jeff wouldn't let Barney get into trouble and vice versa. That was the impression we got all the time.
But just as Holly thinks she's got everything figured out, James Roach enters her life.
Name is James.
James is a local guy. He's described as a mountain man, a survivalist. He lives off the land. He's just sort of isolated.
So there was an attractive quality about someone who is kind of surviving in the wilderness.
James and Holly have a connection.
Both James and Holly had similar hobbies. They both like to drink alcohol, and they also like to take drugs.
Soon, the two begin to date.
She becomes so attached to this guy. Holly never wanted to leave him.
James and Holly start a sexual relationship.
Holly and James are hot and heavy, like almost immediately. And shortly after they get together, he moves in, part and parcel, moves into her house where she's living with her mother. Holly and James don't have jobs. They watch TV, they drink, they smoke marijuana, and they pop prescription pills.
In their drunken stupor, James comes across a film called The Boondock Saints.
As he watches the Boondock Saints, there's something in him that just gets ignited. Boondock Saints is a kind of movie where it's just scene after scene of murder and violence, and it's a bloodbath.
James and Holly like spending time together and watching movies. But even though the two are hot and heavy, she hasn't cut ties with Barney just yet.
Holly keeps seeing Barney while dating James because Barney is giving her money. Barney's giving her drugs, sometimes gifts, and kind of spoiled her a little bit in a way that James never did and James couldn't do because James didn't have a job.
There's also the potential that Barney could then pass on and then leave Holly money in his will. You never know what was going on in Holly's mind.
At first, Holly keeps her relationship with Barney hidden. But then, her secret becomes undone.
James eventually finds out about Holly's relationship with Barney because she tells him. I mean, he, I think, asks, where are you getting this money from? Where are you getting these drugs from? And she says, there's a guy who I see sometimes.
James becomes jealous naturally because he loves Holly and he doesn't want another man in Holly's life.
Answer me.
She tells James about Barney and she tells Barney about James. So she creates a strange threesome, a very strange dynamic where two hate each other because they both desire her.
But instead of feeling remorseful, Holly enjoys the drama.
Holly loved the idea of two men wanting her, desiring her, being attracted to her. It gave her a real sense of entitlement and power and control to feed, really, her ego.
Holly's behavior might be the result of losing her father at a young age.
The father was really her rock. And unfortunately, when he passed on, that tended to really shake her. And that emotion that she feels she couldn't handle. So she appears not to have been able to handle that emotional pain.
Emery Coker, a friend of Barney's family, recalls the tension Holly created.
They would get in arguments. He would tell her, just stay with your boyfriend, stay away from here, and then she would show back up like a stray cat. I used to tease him. I'd say, if you stop feeding a cat, it'll quit coming to your house.
Holly would try to egg on James all the time by kind of dangling Barney in front of him. Holly knew full well that James did not have nearly as much to give financially as Barney did, and she would use that to manipulate him.
Holly uses mind games to control James. But as the arguments escalate, James can't contain his rage.
James would get so upset that he would actually start to physically abuse Holly.
He would hit her and beat her and yell at her, even in front of Holly's mom.
James is a mountain man. He's a doer. And one day he gets a gun, he's gonna go kill Barney. But he's a drunk, and somewhere along the line, he either wandered off or fell asleep and never made it over there.
Throughout the following year, the tainted love triangle between Barney, Holly, and James only gets worse.
There was one time when James broke her rib. That's how aggressive these fights were. Another time where she had a huge bruise on her face, but she tells the court that she goes back to James because she feels like the fight is her fault.
Holly needed all this kind of drama. She needed all this kind of attention.
But no matter how violent their fights become, Holly makes up with James and continues to use Barney.
He was just cha-ching, cha-ching. He was just, you know, an ATM machine that was open all the time and would never turn her away.
In the movie The Boondock Saints, the McManus brothers are constantly surrounded by violence and rage.
The brothers feel as though God has tasked them with cleaning up the crime in Boston, and they will do that by any means necessary.
Like the brothers in The Boondock Saints, James believes killing Barney is a necessary evil.
In Boondock Saints, James thought a character in the movie, which is fantasy, reminded him of Barney. And this character gets killed. So the lines between fantasy and reality get crossed very quickly when you are drunk and high and aggressive.
They were on again, off again, constant fighting back and forth. She'd be in love with him one day, in love with Barney the next.
In The Boondock Saints, Connor and Murphy only take a break from their killing spree to attend Sunday Mass.
The brothers are incredibly religious, so we see them, we meet them in a church, they go to church every week, and even after executing people, they say a prayer.
So, on Easter Sunday, when Barney stops by to see Holly, James feels like it's the perfect time to commit a copycat crime.
He hated this man. He was jealous of this man. It's blind rage. And for James, you just don't see anything else. You just see thoughts of revenge. When Barney showed up on Holly's doorstep, James, just upon seeing him, it triggered an incredible amount of rage and resentment. The image of just seeing Barney standing there really inflamed James.
James comes out of his home, chases after Barney with a gun in hand, and points it right at Barney.
James will do anything to get Barney out of his life once and for all.
This was a relationship that was very, very toxic, but it was also based on jealousy and revenge and a lot of emotions that can make people act in certain ways that is highly volatile. So watching a very violent movie just seemed to trigger all those emotions.
Holly Crawford is in a tangled love affair between her boyfriend, James Roach, and her friend, Barney Evans. And the movie, The Boondock Saints, is going to set off a wave of violent acts.
The violence they watched in the film triggered the violence they felt in their emotional life.
After asking Holly to cut ties with Barney multiple times, James has had enough.
On Easter Sunday, Barney actually shows up to Holly's house when James is there. James confronts Barney with a gun.
James is a violent man, and the rage he feels toward Barney seems similar to what makes the McManus brothers in the movie The Boondock Saints become killers.
They feel morally like they have to clean up the city. So where normal people might have guilt and regret over the lives that they've taken, these brothers, aside from the religious aspect, believe that it is their duty to be the ones to clean up the city.
But two brothers against an entire criminal organization leads to a whole lot of bloodshed.
The movie is especially gory and bloody, and I think that high level of action and blood was definitely something that lured people in.
James isn't scared to get a little blood on his hands if it means Barney will be gone for good.
James puts a gun to Barney's head and says, "If you ever come here again, I will kill you."
See her. She's mine, not yours. Kill you.
He's threatening he's going to shoot him. He's going to kill him. He actually points it at Barney's head, but it ends, without tragedy.
For him, Holly was his, and he viewed Barney as a predator.
After the incident, Barney calls the police, who pay a visit to Holly's house.
This is the straw that breaks the camel's back for James. This is enough.
The next day, the tension around Holly's house is at an all-time high.
James's emotions were raw from the day before, causing him to be in a very, very bad mood.
They were drinking pretty much all day. They were drunk and high, and then we're sitting down and watching a movie. They're watching Boondock Saints.
This movie is full of violence and murders. Holly and James were high and drunk watching this film. And that made a deadly combination.
In the Boondock Saints, murder is the only way to clean up the streets of Boston.
The streets are overrun with crime, and the McManus brothers want to do whatever is necessary to make the people of Boston and their families feel safer.
While Connor and Murphy McManus fight the bad guys to the death, off-screen, James is inspired.
In Boondock Saints, James thought a character in the movie, which is fantasy, reminded him of Barney. And this character gets killed. So the lines between fantasy and reality get crossed very quickly when you are drunk and high and aggressive.
The movie, it's the drinking, it's the drugs, it's the confrontation the day before. It all comes together and boils over in this blind rage.
But instead of trying to calm James down, Holly encourages him.
Well, when James said he was going to go kill Barney, Holly actually said, yeah, no one will miss him. She likes the idea that the man that loves her is willing to kill another man who loves her. And it makes her feel very important.
I think at this point, the line was drawn in the sand by both of these men. And Holly was going to have to choose.
High on adrenaline from drugs, alcohol, and the Boondock Saints, James grabs his gun and tells Holly he's ready to kill Barney.
He was kind of trying to protect her in a way. He didn't want her involved.
You're staying here.
But Holly said, I'll come with you.
James and Holly decide to pay Barney a visit at his home.
Holly goes to Barney's house, knocks on his door, and lures him outside, knowing that James has a .22 caliber rifle.
Holly decides to put an end to her twisted love triangle for good.
The fact that she lures Barney out shows you her intent, her lack of empathy. Here is Holly, who'd done nothing with her life, and yet she now is in control of another man's life.
Barney answers the door. He only sees Holly and doesn't feel threatened.
While Holly's luring poor Barney into a vulnerable position, James is, in the back of the car, readying his .22, loading it up for the confrontation that's coming.
This is the moment James has been waiting for. With the Boondock Saints playing in his head, he eyes his target.
He points his gun at Barney, and James takes the first shot.
James Roach is about to confront a man he's wanted to kill for over a year. His inspiration to kill, the cult classic film, The Boondock Saints.
Boondock Saints is a kind of movie where it's just scene after scene of murder and violence, and it's a bloodbath.
In the movie, the McManus brothers are on a mission to kill the crime lords infiltrating their city.
The brothers are vigilantes, and they are willing to kill people. They feel like it's their duty, their calling, their gift.
The way it transpired, because the law doesn't do what should be done, then maybe they thought they were the vigilantes or something to that nature,
James believes Barney deserves to die for sleeping with his girlfriend Holly. All in the name of vigilante justice.
James fires at Barney 5 times, hitting him 4 of the times, killing him.
But the bloodshed doesn't stop. Hearing the gunshots from inside, Barney's son Jeff comes rushing out to see what is going on.
He runs outside to see what's happening, sees his dad lying there dead, and yells, "You shot my father."
It must have been incredible for Jeff to see his father shot, killed, dying right before him.
Jeff runs inside the house with his father's killers right behind him.
There was a struggle. Jeffrey eventually gets punched in the face, and he falls to the ground.
He got halfway up the hall, and then Roach shot him 5 times.
State police believe he was trying to crawl away because he was shot in his lower back side for one of those rounds, but he died after he was shot point blank range right in his head.
It baffles me and scares you at the same time because you know what happened, the outcome was, and you can't picture what they were thinking as it was happening. Think, what would I have done different if I could have been there? Or...
With the 2 men dead, Holly and James flee the crime scene. Back at Holly's home, the copycat killers can't keep what they have just done a secret.
Holly ends up telling her daughters, what she did. And she said, I put a hole in Barney and Jeff's heads. Their first question was, are you sorry? And she just said, it was like shooting a deer.
You expect me to believe that?
But Alexa doesn't believe her mom is telling the truth.
James and Holly are drug addicts, so they have lied about many things and exaggerated many situations. So when Holly tells Alexa, Alexa may not have believed her mother.
But James and Holly are indeed killers, just like the main characters from the movie that inspired them. In the Boondock Saints, the McManus brothers kill a lot of people and leave their bodies for the detectives to find.
I think that they leave the bodies where they are because of the fact that they're trying to send a message to everyone else that we're coming and this is your fate.
As seen in the film, James also leaves his victims' bodies at the crime scene.
They have no idea when Barney and Jeff's bodies may be found, so they're completely in the dark.
And unlike the Boondock Saints, these copycat killers are anything but vigilantes.
They did not kill for the good of humanity. No one is going to spare their lives, so they decide they need to get out of town. Every second is ticking towards the time when it will be too late.
Holly Crawford and her boyfriend, James Roach, have committed the ultimate sin, killing in cold blood. High on drugs and alcohol, it was only after watching the Boondock Saints that James and Holly decided to go in for the kill.
They're angry, and they've been angry for a long time. They sit down and watch the Boondock Saints, and the violence that they saw really just ignited something in them.
James shot and killed Holly's lover, Barney, and his son, Jeff. Holly stood by and watched.
Do it.
This yearning to kill Barney was a long time coming. James felt Barney was interfering with his relationship with Holly, and he couldn't take it any longer.
After the murder, James and Holly decide to skip town in order to avoid arrest.
They have no means to go anywhere. They are unemployed drug addicts.
James and Holly are making their getaway, and to do so, they go into Holly's mom's purse. They steal her debit card and her car keys.
But they don't get very far.
Holly's mom eventually puts a stop on her card, knowing that her daughter stole it.
Holly's mom calls the police and tells them she thinks her daughter and James may have killed Barney.
Holly's mom said they were watching Boondock Saints. She heard James say, "I want to kill that son of a bee."
So local authorities pay a visit to Barney's house and are shocked by what they find.
That's where they find Barney's and Jeff's bodies shot to death in their own home. State police also found .22 caliber shell casings around both of the bodies.
Once they discover the crime scene and the murders, they know they need to find the killers. So an all-out manhunt goes out for James and Holly.
In the meantime, with no money in their pockets, Holly and James turn the car around and return home.
Holly and James eventually go back to Holly's mom's house because they had pretty much nowhere else to go and they had no money.
When Holly and James get home, they know that the police are going to be looking for them. It's only a matter of time. So they head out into the woods where they try to collect their thoughts and figure out what they're going to do next.
But they don't stay hidden for long.
State police helicopter finds them hidden out in like a makeshift camp in the woods. And when they come up to them, they find everything they need. They find the murder weapon.
Police arrest them. They're charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. And why first degree is such a big deal is because it carries an automatic life sentence in Pennsylvania.
James and Holly confess to the crimes, but both plead not guilty to the charges. During the trial, James stays loyal to Holly.
At James's trial, he claimed that he shot and killed Barney and his son Jeff out of self-defense. James is trying to distance Holly as much as he can from the murder.
Holly turns on James in an effort to save herself.
Holly claims that she only went along with James Roach to Barney's house because she was trying to stop James. She knew that James had a violent temper, that he could be aggressive, and she was trying to stop him.
Do it!
Holly turns on James, and of course that makes perfect sense. Holly doesn't have any care or concern for anyone except for Holly. James doesn't turn on Holly because he loves Holly. Love makes you do crazy things.
In the Boondock Saints, Connor and Murphy McManus escape arrest when the detective trailing them throughout the movie decides to help them with their mission.
It's really like a superhero ending without the masks or capes.
At the end of the movie, the brothers make a bold proclamation before killing the crime boss.
The brothers swear to eradicate evil wherever they find it. Instead of facing jail time, the media dubs the brothers the Saints.
In real life, confessing to their crimes doesn't make James and Holly heroes. Instead, it puts them behind bars for life.
Holly and James were both found guilty of murder and convicted to life in prison.
While Connor and Murphy McManus go on to cult classic fame, James Roach and Holly Crawford disappear behind prison walls.
I hate her now. I don't have no respect whatsoever for her. They went there with the intent to kill them. They didn't go there to talk, or Roach never would have had a gun in his hand to start out with. They carried out what they went to do. They were good people. That's all that mattered, you know? I just wish they were here.